Happy Monday, and welcome back to the Lorden Arts channel. I'm John Lorden. Thank you so much for spending some time with us here today. Case Cracked is the show where we look into a mystery, and what are the critical pieces that help solve that mystery. Today's episode is called Into the Light. Early in the morning on February 21st, 1987, guests at the Super 8 Motel in Elizabethtown, Kentucky, were agitated and worried. The front desk clerk, a newly engaged 41-year-old mother of two named Vicki Heath, was nowhere to be found. One guest finally called the police. Arriving police officers turned off of I-65 and into the motel's parking lot. They began searching, hoping that she could be found nearby. Behind the building, next to the trash cans, was the body of Vicki Heath. An investigation would show that she had been sexually assaulted, shot twice with a .38 caliber pistol, and disposed of, like garbage, next to the hotel trash cans. The investigation into her death would turn up few leads and no immediate persons of interest. For 2 years, her case sat until another similar murder took place a little less than 5 hours away. At a Days Inn off of I-65 in Merrillville, Indiana, a newly promoted night auditor, Peggy Gill, was enjoying her new position at the front desk after having worked as a maid for years. The 24-year-old loved baking and decorating cakes, cross-stitching, and painting. During her night shift on March 2, 1989, she was taking care of guests in the inn's 70 rooms until her shift ended at 7 a.m. When she didn't call her boss early in the morning to check in, the police were called. Investigators found that at about 1:30 a.m., she checked in with her last guest before returning to the front. She was then forced from her desk by an unknown individual who also stole $179 from the cash drawer. Reports on this next part differ, but at 6:30 a.m., either a police officer or a hotel worker found Peggy's body lying at the end of a vacant hall. As with Vicki Heath, Peggy had been sexually assaulted and shot twice, this time with a .22 caliber gun. 2.5 hours later, and less than an hour's drive away, police in Remington, Indiana, were working a case that was very similar to Peggy's. At a Days Inn, off of I-65, 34-year-old mother of two, Jean Gilbert, was working as a part-time auditor. She was abducted from the inn at gunpoint. Her abductor stole $247 from the cash drawer. Her body was found 15 miles away, in a ditch near a farm. She had been sexually assaulted as well and had been shot with the same .22 caliber gun that was used to kill Peggy Gill. Investigators in both states could see the pattern and feared that they had a serial killer on their hands. Unfortunately, just as in Vicki's death, no evidence was found that could help them track down the killer. DNA samples were taken from all three bodies, but yielded very little in the way of evidence. Their first break in the case would come the following year. On January 2, 1990, a 21-year-old clerk at a Days Inn on I-65 in Columbus, Ohio, called police to report that she had been sexually assaulted and stabbed in a robbery at the motel. She managed to escape her attacker, and she had a description of him. Soon, composite sketches were being shared with the public that showed a 6-foot-tall man in his 30s to mid-40s, wearing a knit cap with gray hair, green eyes, and a beard. The gaze of his right eye also seemed to drift up when he was looking forward. Even though the composite was circulated widely and had some strong identifiable features, the man wasn't found. With all of the assaults and robberies happening so close to I-65, investigators felt their killer was either a truck driver or a seasonal worker who traveled the same route year after year. In 1991, a woman in Minnesota was sexually assaulted and stabbed by her attacker, thankfully surviving the ordeal. Her description of the man also fit perfectly with the 1990 attack and composite drawing. Even with 2 eyewitnesses, investigators were still without any significant leads, and the case finally grew cold. It would sit until 2008, when DNA samples that had been taken at the crime scenes could be processed using newer methods. The evidence would show that they were indeed dealing with the same man, as the samples from the first 3 victims, Vicky, Peggy, and Jean, all contained his DNA. By 2019, the FBI was involved, and investigators turned to genetic genealogy to help find their killer. Soon, a match was found in a man named Harry Edward Greenwell. Their findings were then verified using a sample from one of his family members. Greenwell was a Kentucky native with a long list of past offenses. The FBI's timeline shows that he was arrested for both armed robbery and sodomy charges in Kentucky during 1963 and 1965. He was paroled in 1969. 13 years later, in 1982, he was arrested in Iowa on burglary charges. Twice, he escaped from custody, but was eventually caught. He was released from prison in 1983. Sometime after that, he started his career with the Canadian Pacific Railroad, which traveled through the Midwest, allowing him access to multiple victims in different states, making it very hard to track him down. On April 5th, 2022, investigators' findings were finally announced publicly in a news conference. However, Greenwell would once again evade capture, as by the time he was identified, he had passed away. He died at the age of 68 from cancer, leaving no justice for these families and no method for investigators to question him about other crimes that he could potentially be linked to. At the moment, investigators are looking into cases in several states that they believe Greenwell struck in, ranging from murders, sexual assaults, to robberies all across the Midwest. But his DNA does keep revealing truths. Greenwell's DNA has been matched to 4 other crimes against women in several states, all worked as motel clerks near I-65. If you or someone you know lives in the Midwest and believe that you had contact with Greenwell, please report it to your local authorities or your local FBI field office. Greenwell's family were shocked to find out the news of his crimes. His widow, Julie Jenkins, was informed of her husband's past after her nephew delivered the news to her. She described her late husband as kind and caring, with a temper, but she thought that was normal. She said that she had no idea he had such a violent past, but promised that if she had known anything, she would have told someone. When asked if she believed that he was responsible for more murders, she said, quote, "It's certainly a possibility. When you know what you do about serial killers, they generally don't just stop. So I pray that there aren't going to be any more victims that he's linked to, but I fear there's a real possibility." She also added, "I'm sorry for those people as well. It makes me not trust my judgment." She says she feels horrible for the victims' families and says that she's sorry she had no idea what was happening. Kimberly Gilbert Wright, Jean Gilbert's daughter, still remembers her mother's last words to her and her brother, which were, "I love you and I'll see you tomorrow." Kimberly states, "I didn't see her that tomorrow, but I see her every day. I see her in me. I see her in my brother. I see her in my family. I'd like to believe that whatever each of us defines as justice, or what each of us might define as closure, that we're all now able to share the healing process, knowing the long-known attacker has been brought out of the dark and into the light." Case cracked. I would like to thank The Independent, The New York Times, WFLA.com, IndyStar.com, CBS News, WHAS11.com, and CourierPress.com. Of course, the biggest thank you goes to Christy Arnhart for researching and writing up today's case, and here she is now to discuss it with us. Christy, in this age of genetic genealogy and these solves, thankfully these families are getting answers to the cases, but there's still a lot of big questions that are left behind.
Yeah.
This case is kind of interesting to me because you have someone that has the makeup of a serial killer, but we frequently hear that they evolve and sometimes become more lethal. But in this case, it kind of goes backwards. Like he becomes less lethal in the later attacks to the point where he actually leaves enough information for composite sketches of him to be flying around. Did you bump into any possible reasoning or explanation for why that happened that way?
I did not, other than he got cocky.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the only thing I could come up with all the coverage in the news and whatnot, and he had still gotten away with it. I think he got cocky.
That's kind of what I was thinking too. There's just something about maybe like him liking the attention from the press, because he's pulling these off and like he's not hearing anything about it. And all of a sudden now, people are talking. Yeah, it's kind of strange to go in that direction. So you figure it's got to be feeding whatever his needs are in performing these crimes in some way.
Oh, yeah.
But in the notes you sent over, you also mentioned a chance that there is another highway serial killer, and he could actually be the same guy. You want to tell us a bit about that?
Yes, as it turns out, he may also be the I-70 killer as well. This killer murdered 6 victims in 5 cities. There are several points supporting and opposing this. Let me just give you some of these.
Sure.
Okay, now as far as supporting Greenwell, we've got 3 killings attributed to him between 1987 and 1990. The I-70 killings happened in 1992, so the time frame's there.
Yeah.
The composites for the I-70 killer are very similar to Greenwell too.
Yeah, there's one that really strikes me, and it was actually a picture of Greenwell, like when he's all clean shaven and stuff. We'll bring it up on screen so you guys can see it right now. But compare this picture to this composite. It's kind of uncanny. Like I would think you've got the guy here, but of course we don't know about the composite artists, like what's motivating them. Like I don't know, did they take some information from the Greenwell killings back at the time, and that somehow got wrapped into the composite or something? I don't know. But it is kind of interesting that we do have some strong similarities there.
Oh yeah, there are. Yeah. But there are even more reasons to say that he's not the I-70 killer.
Okay.
While the I-65 killer targeted hotels along the interstate, the I-70 killer chose small strip malls along the highway. All of the I-65 targets were female, and as were all the I-70 targets except for one, and it was a male with a ponytail.
Okay.
The I-65 killer was also a robber, but the I-70 killer showed no interest in money.
That's a pretty big one. Yeah.
It is. It is. Okay. Now, if Greenwell was also the I-70 killer, he would have been around 47 at the time. And the I-70 task force thinks that he's much younger than that age. Okay. So they're even, saying it's not the right age range.
Well, we know that in this instance, we have DNA that kind of comes into play and gives us the answer on this. Do they have DNA in those cases as well for the I-70?
Well, DNA samples have already been tested in Terre Haute, and additional samples are awaiting results in Indianapolis, Raytown, Wichita, and St. Charles.
Okay.
So we've got quite a chain of evidence there they're going through. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, and that'll be interesting to hear. First of all, are they really down to one person in all of those I-70 instances? It sounds like they might be, but then, of course, comparing that to I-65 and then seeing if there's connectivity there as well. It's weird because the time frame, and even to the point of what his wife was saying, kind of matches up. Like she's like, you hear about these serial killers, they don't stop.
Yeah.
But hearing that the businesses that he attacked were different, and he wasn't going for money necessarily in those later attacks. I don't know. I'd be curious.
It's hard. I mean, did something scare him off? Yeah. It would make this all so much simpler to be able to say, hey, it's not 2 people. We've got this one guy.
Right.
But I don't know. There's a lot of little questions there. I'm really interested to see the DNA come back.
Yeah. Well, and we will definitely keep you guys updated if there's any major development on that front as well. Christy, thank you so much for all your hard work on today's episode. We really appreciate you. And I've got some other people to thank right now. Thank you, PayPal supporters Jennifer Dixon and Angela Welch Sola. For over 6 years, we've always run limited commercial ads here on YouTube, and we can't do that without your support. If you'd like to help the channel keep going and growing, please visit lordandarts.com. There, you can sign up for Patreon, sign up for PayPal, buy merchandise, or even just buy us a coffee like Alexander Voss recently did. We know that learning about the mechanisms that help support and find justice in these cases is important to help us understand the many unsolved cases we also cover, and we really appreciate your support in allowing us to continue doing that. Remember, You can get another Lord and Art story every week on the Seriously Mysterious podcast. A new episode is coming tomorrow and every Tuesday after that. Visit seriouslymysterious.com and subscribe on your favorite podcatchers. While you're here, don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell icon below if you want to catch one of our weekly Secret Studio live shows. And of course, I'll be back with a new Unsolved Mystery for you on Friday, right here on the Lord and Arts channel.